Today's training talk is brought to you by Avery Brewing Co., based in Boulder, Colorado, USA. This is the standard flagship IPA from Avery, but they make lots of different varieties, including the Pacer IPA, which I featured last month in my commercial with my good friend Pacer the dog. Beer. It's well balanced with hoppy deliciousness. It is bold, yet smooth. It's refreshing, yet warming. Very high on the drinkability scale. Check them out at Avery Brewing Co. Now, it's time for your regularly scheduled training talk. Let's get started. Hi there, Coach Sage Canaday of SageRunning.com here to talk about moving up from maybe road marathon or lower distance races on the roads to ultra marathons, mainly on the trails, but moving up in distance, that progression. And first off, I'm going to say that with our business, coaching business, SageRunning.com, Coach Sandy is a co-creator of the business and all the training plans we have at Sage Running. So, it has my name in it. It's kind of confusing. It's not just me. It's been a team effort from day one with Coach Sandy. Check out her channel, Running Wild to Believe. I'll link to it at the end of this video as well as in the description below. But she is the mastermind between all the coaching and the any service, any distance motto. And Sandy's got a great story because she jumped into doing 100-mile races at a young age, right out of college or during college, winning 100-mile races, setting course records at 100-mile distances. So we've done all that. We've done the any service, any distance from road marathon distance. I raced 5K, 10K in track in college and then eventually moved my way up. Maybe you're in the same boat though. Maybe you've started running recently or you've gotten back into running and you've been doing 5K or 10K road races. Maybe you've been dabbling in some half marathons. You're looking to do a marathon and eventually an ultra marathon. But that's the general trend, is that you move up in distance kind of as you gain more experience. So this video is mainly about transitioning from those road half marathons or road marathons and my 5 key tips, my 5 key points for making that successful transition to ultra marathons, 50K distance, 100K distance, even 100 miles in the mountains and trails. I'll admit I have not done very well at the 100-mile mountain races that I've done, the few 100-mile, 160K distance races, but I could hold my own up to 100K, right? Tarawera 100K, Black Canyon 100K, and coming from the road marathon background and moving up, has been kind of a natural progression and transition. So here we go, my top 5 tips for making that jump to ultra marathons. All right, so tip number one, you gotta have a consistent mileage base, that aerobic base I was talking about. Easy paced running mainly, but just consistency, just getting out the door on a regular basis. Instead of running 3 days a week, you start running 5 days a week, right? Instead of running 30 miles a week or 50K a week, maybe you've started to average 50 miles a week or 80K a week. That kind of base generally really helps you in long distance racing. And so for me, I was running a lot of road marathons out of college. I was running semi-professionally for Hanson's Brooks from 2009 to 2012. Ran the Olympic trials in 2012 in the marathon. I had all this half marathon and full marathon road training under my belt before doing my first ultra, which was the Chuckanut 50K back in 2012. So if you've gotten in a structured marathon or half marathon training program and you're doing some different workouts over time, or you've got some element of a long run, but mainly you've got that consistency of just getting out the door, hitting those weekly mileage totals, spending time on your feet, training the aerobic system, even at relatively low intensity, it's going to set you up really well for doing an ultra marathon. If we look at the physiology in terms of stressing your heart and lungs, it's a 50K, as long as it's not a super high altitude 50K in the mountains or something really technical, is a natural extension off of a marathon, right? 26.2 miles versus 31 miles. It's not a crazy chasm to cross really, right? It's just a little bit longer. Now you start getting into the 100-mile distances, that's kind of a different beast altogether, but 50K is very doable if you've gotten in that consistent mileage base and experience in marathon training. And if you haven't, it's still about that consistency, just getting your weekly mileage up, staying healthy, and getting in that aerobic base. So that's tip number one, consistent high mileage aerobic base over time. So I preach that for all distance running events from the 5K on up, right? So tip number 2, I actually wrote these down, I'm organized here. Tip number 2 is adding in hills or adding in vertical. And I track this on training on Strava. If you have a GPS watch, or you're doing hill repeats. But that's the whole idea that you're starting to run some vertical gain. A lot of ultramarathon races on trails, they're not gonna be flat, right? Some are pretty flat. I guess you could do them on a track. I haven't done that yet, but there's gonna be a lot of vertical gain. But it's not just that you need to prepare your legs for that pounding of downhills and that climbing strength for uphills. It's that you need to just build overall strength, and it's great cardiovascular benefits for your heart and lungs to run uphill, especially running uphill hard. So in a lot of our sage running training plans for MUT running, mountain ultra trail running, we do have things like high intensity short hill repeats, or people doing all uphill tempo runs or treadmill workouts where you're adding in vertical gain up relatively steep grades, right? We're talking 5% grade, 10% grade, even 20% grade. If you're training for a mountain race, you need to get used to that change in vertical. And so add in hills, add in some long runs that are rolling, that mimic the profile of the course, the ultramarathon course you're training for. So the hills are speed work in disguise, right? I think Frank Shorter, some famous person back in the day, said that hills are speed work in disguise because instead of going to the track and burning a bunch of 400s doing speed, you're doing high intensity hill reps, or you're doing long runs with long grinds up and down hills. Your legs get really strong doing that. Your heart and lungs get better with your aerobic adaptations, pushing the envelope, doing that, lactate threshold sessions uphill, and getting used to that quad pounding on the downhills. But get a lot of strength and a lot of benefits from adding in vertical to your training. And, it could be on roads, it could be on treadmills. A lot of it could be on trails, like what you're going to race. You want it to be specific to the ultra you're training for. So that's another second key tip from transitioning from the road marathons, shorter distances, to the ultra marathons, adding in vertical hills in your training. Tip number three, throw your time splits out the window. Unless you're running a 50K like on a track, or you're doing a really flat, non-technical ultra marathon race, you're probably going to have no idea in your first ultra kind of what relative pace you might hold. You might get really frustrated if your GPS isn't working very well in the mountains. Get a COROS, sponsor plug there. You're going to be thrown off by your splits. Technical trails, little hills, weather conditions make a bigger factor in ultramarathon races. Altitude. So, you might be running really slow mile splits or really slow kilometer splits compared to what you would be running on the road, right? We have a lot of people that run sub 3 hour marathon on the roads. They run, Boston Marathon. They're fast on the roads. Then all of a sudden you throw them out on the trails and they're splitting 4 or 5 hours for a 50K, 6 hours for a 50K at something like Speed Goat, right? So, you got to throw time out the window. I'm slogging 10, 15-minute miles. I've done races where I'm power hiking up a mountain at 25-minute mile pace, right? What is that in kilometers? Like 18-minute kilometer pace, power hiking, right? It's not like road running, flat track, fast running at all. So you throw times out the window. You got to go by effort and time on feet. And a lot of this happens with your training too. It takes longer to run. If you're trying to do a 60-mile training week or a 100K training week, it's going to take you a lot longer time if you're doing a lot of up and down hills, you're doing a lot of vertical, you're doing a lot of trail running, especially if it's muddy or snowy or technical trails. It takes longer time to cover distance. So throw those road paces out the window. Don't be too caught up in the quantitative numbers with your cadence or your heart rate or the velocity you're hitting, because trail running, ultramarathon running, you got to be able to roll with the different splits, really slow splits usually. Even on technical downhills, the splits can be really slow, even though it feels fast and the effort is high. Tip number four, specific long runs. Long runs are the bread and butter of a lot of our marathon and ultramarathon training plans at Sage Running. And like I said, look up the course that you're training for. Look at the relative vertical gain and loss that it has. Look at the types of trails it's on and try to mimic that in some of your shorter long runs. Now, obviously, you're not going to go out and probably run a 50K ultra in training for your first 50K or even your first 50 mile or first 80K type of race, right? But you might be doing a 20-mile long run or a 32K long run. And like I said in the previous tip of throwing your time goals out the window, you might just be looking to spend time on your feet. You go out on the weekend or whenever you have more time to actually train on trails, and you say, okay, I'm going to do a 4-hour long run. I'm going to spend half the afternoon out on the trails, and or half the morning, most of the morning, 4 or 5 hour long run, right? It's more about time on feet. Maybe you only covered 18 miles or 30K, right? But it's still a good stimulus. So, because it has lots of up and down and it mimics the course you're training for. So time on feet, specific long runs, and they're not all fun, slow slogs, adventure slogs. A lot of them can be, but some you got to throw down in. Some you got to practice running faster than race pace. You got to feel what it's like to kind of get on that edge of bonking and dialing in your fuel sources. And actually talking about fuel sources, we'll add that as another thing. You need to have probably more calories on you as well as gear to carry that. So you have, these hydration packs, staying hydrated, but also staying fueled. This is the Canaday My Spring Energy. Enter code SAGE for a discount. Obvious sponsor plug. I take the Hill Aid a lot as well. It's a nice mango flavor, as well as the Power Rush. It's got beets in it. Check them out, myspringenergy.com. Enter code SAGE for a discount. That's a plug. But you got to have calories on you for these longer efforts, right? You get beyond, even in a marathon, you're maybe taking 3 or 4 gels, right? Drinking some electrolyte drink, drinking some calories in. Well, in an ultra marathon, if you bonk, it's going to be bad. So you're going to need a lot more, right? It's hard to go 50K or 31 miles or 50 miles without stopping at the aid stations for a bit and rehydrating and eating stuff and carrying stuff maybe in a pack with you. And depends on the aid stations, but research what's at the aid stations, practice your fueling strategy as well on these specific long runs. And that's kind of my 5th point, specific nutrition and gear. You're going to have to figure that out. I've got playlists and training talks. I'll put a playlist link at the end of this, as well as if you subscribe on here, I've got nutrition training talks for ultra marathons as well. But that strategy needs to be different because in ultras, it makes more of a difference. You're spending more time out there. You're usually you have to roll with the weather more because it's a longer time period, a longer duration. And it's going to be a roller coaster ride, right? You have a lot of ups and downs. They call it life in a day, right? When you run 100 miles, I've definitely experienced that, running all night, running with a headlamp. You got to have more jackets, rain jackets, warmer gear. You could get more extreme temperature changes as well, but it depends on where your ultramarathon race is and how long it takes you exactly. But you got to be more prepared compared to a road marathon, unless it's like the Boston Marathon a couple years ago when it was freezing cold and there was a headwind and I didn't have a jacket and froze. But anyway, I digress there. Thanks so much for your support on this channel. Really, really appreciate it. Comment below what you'd like to hear about in future training talks. I love your comments. Love hearing what you guys are up to. Definitely keep track of the OTQ series, my marathon training for a sub 2:19 marathon, Houston Marathon, coming up in 7 weeks. Got more workout videos on the way. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate your support. All the Patreon supporters that really make this channel possible. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Hope your running's going well. Subscribe on here. Check out our training plans that Coach Sandy and I developed at sagerunning.com. Check out her channel, Running Wild to Believe. Thank you again. Stay tuned for more.